Most of us will one day face a moment when we realize our best days are far behind us. That moment may stalk up gradually, when one day we'll blink and our hands have become old, our bodies pained and feeble, our souls weary and our minds forgetful. One day, a stranger will be reflected back in the mirror. The beautiful, healthy, brilliant person we once were will have faded, never to be found again. Gone too will be people loved and cherished over a lifetime, until we sit in our prison built of failing flesh and mind, filled with a lifetime worth of regrets of things left undone. Growing old was a natural topic of discussion after great-grandma Cassandra's funeral. Many of us will become a burden for our families and find ourselves in a nursing home to wither away our remaining days. At the wake, my uncle shared some stories from another relative who worked in a nursing home for many years. It had undergone many name changes over the years, but started reputably enough as the Sunset Eden, with a caring and dedicated nursing staff. An orderly is often an underappreciated job, being neither pleasant nor easy. Not because of having to clean up after elderly bodies. No, that's the easy part. It's more the psychological toll. The elderly residents are there because, well, they have problems their families can no longer deal with, nor want to. Their medical complications, their fractured minds with unpredictable personalities and moods, their constant demands. They are now all your responsibility. Multiplied several times over with multiple patients, and even the most caring nursing staff would be tempted to keep their patients sedated just to get through the day. Over time, as the Sunset Eden grew larger and the management changed, so too did its priorities. Profit became the focus over the residents. Overworked nursing staff found themselves stretched thinner, looking after more residents in the name of efficiency. All this, combined with budget cuts, the quality of the people hired deteriorated with the wages offered. The worst of these new staff would use their positions of power to abuse, mistreat, and steal from the vulnerable residents, not all that dissimilar to the guards from the infamous Stanford prison experiment. Patience and sympathy were replaced with punishment and fear as the main tools for compliance. And no tool was more effective at the Sunset Eden than an infamous room with a sinister reputation. Officially, it was called Ward 306, but it was known as the Suicide Room by staff and residents due to its unusual history. A small ward with space enough for 2 beds and its own ensuite. It was part of a hospital building, converted in 1932. For the first few years, nothing distinguished it from any of the other rooms. That changed in 1936. The elderly Mr. Finlay, the room's only resident at the time, was found hanging from the ceiling one morning. A crude, makeshift rope made from an assortment of ties had snapped and broken his neck. After a thorough police investigation, no motive nor suspicious activity was ever found, so the case officially closed off as a suicide. Death is not an unusual occurrence in a nursing home, but over a quick span of the next 8 years, 5 more deaths would occur in that room. All of them ruled as suicides. One resident had drowned in the bathtub. Another had consumed a box of rat poison. The third and fourth had simultaneously placed pistols in their mouths, splattering the walls with their brains. The fifth was the most unusual, and the only one to leave a note. He had stabbed deeply into his own eye with a kitchen knife after mutilating his body with a straight razor. Above his body, on the wall, was a message written with his own blood. In jaggedly scrawled capital letters within a gruesome 3x3 grid were the words: Tempus, Idax, Vetum, Edum, Quod, Es, Edus, Quod, Sum. From there, the legend of Ward 306 grew. The management would make numerous attempts to repaint the walls or cover them with paper, but stains would always gradually seep back through, marking them with splashes of blood or ghostly faces. The faint stench of something foul and putrid began to linger, cutting through even perfumes used to mask it. The air in the room took on a constant chill dampness, no matter the weather outside. Occupants would complain of strange sounds heard at night. Mournful, wailing, soft sobs that echoed around the walls, particularly from the bathroom, and they refused to stay in it. Over the years, the room would be inspected many times by different engineers to explain the causes. They concluded the wall stains were most likely the accumulated leaks from rusted pipes running through the inner walls, the putrid smell from broken sewage drains under the bathroom. The room's acoustic signature, amplifying vibrations from an outside air conditioner unit to create the strange noises, and its condenser increased the humidity in the room. Combined with the room's aspect that kept it away from direct sunlight, the temperature would be constantly cooler than outside. Despite these reassurances, residents and staff still avoided the suicide room. Even a luxurious renovation could not convince any residents to move in. For a profit-minded administration, it was too valuable a space to be left unused. In 1971, they had what seemed to them a clever idea. Ward 306 would be used as an unofficial punishment room. When the elderly residents were not being cooperative enough, they were threatened with being placed in the suicide room, euphemistically called spending the night with Sue. Knowing the history, the longer-term residents immediately, if reluctantly, became more compliant. Newer residents would be more defiant, however, until they had their first night with Sue. The stories of their experiences later would only further fuel the room's reputation, such as that of a certain Mr. Fisher. It had become standard procedure for a night watchman to patrol the wards throughout the night. To check on residents, they would shine their flashlight through square windows cut into each door. Mr. Fisher had dared to accuse an orderly of stealing his watch, and he was locked in 306 as punishment. During one round, as he watched the bright flashlight beam light up through the window, then move on, he was startled to find a figure standing quietly in the room by the door. It was a young girl. Thin, deathly pale, and unmoving. She stood facing the bed and staring at him through her empty eye sockets. Frozen in fear and unable to scream, he cowered under his sheets like a frightened child, staring back at the girl, waiting for her to move. It was not until the footsteps of the guard returning could be heard that the girl shifted. She turned towards the bathroom and silently glided towards it, eventually disappearing from view. Mr. Fisher stayed awake, staring at the ensuite, but the girl did not return. He eventually tired and succumbed to sleep. Waking in the morning, he saw a trail of water in the shape of footprints coming from that bathroom, leading all the way up, right next to his bed. And his bed sheets were soaked. Other residents told of tapping noises, like hard claws against the tiles, from under the bed. They would feel their blankets slowly being dragged from them below. It would start as a gentle pull, like a heavy blanket slowly falling from its own weight. If they attempted to pull it back up, the tugging would suddenly become stronger, more violent. The staff would open the doors in the morning to find these residents cowering, huddled in the bed, with their blankets cocooned and shredded underneath them on the floor. But of all these stories, the most chilling was that of Mrs. Wainwright. She was strong-willed and had lived in the Sunset Eden for many years. She had grown concerned over the treatment many of the residents were suffering and was accused of inciting disorder when she started to strongly voice her opinions. To serve as a warning to others, she was confined to 306 for 2 whole days. She was dragged, kicking and screaming and shouting to the room by 2 orderlies. At the door, she pushed with her arms and feet against the frames, spitting at the orderlies in her desperate struggles. It was a futile effort, and the moment they pried her arms away and carried her through, it was as if all the fight had drained from her body. She was suddenly quiet, cooperative, just smirking and nodding while they tucked her into the bed. As they locked the door, Mrs. Wainwright was still smirking and nodding her head at them through the glass. That night, the guard doing the rounds would find her in the beam of his flashlight, still laying in that bed, smirking and just nodding towards the door. On his next round, she would be sitting perfectly still by the side of the bed, facing the door with the same expression. When told to go to sleep, she simply nodded, but otherwise stayed as she was. The following day, she didn't touch any of the food that was brought to her. She just followed the orderlies around with her eyes as they went about their duties in the room. However, if they got too close to her, she would hiss and scream and even bite them. Mrs. Wainwright was beginning to creep all the staff out, especially on the second night when the patrolman reported shining his flashlight through the door, only to see her face right up against the glass, smirking and nodding. When it was time for her to be released the next day, the orderlies found her sitting on the bed with her back to the door. Cockroaches were crawling out from her open mouth. She was dead. Rigor mortis had already set in and started to fade. An autopsy revealed that she had died 2 days earlier from a cardiogenic shock. That's a heart attack, likely brought on from the stress and exertions in her struggles being brought into the room. The family of Mrs. Wainwright were appalled and livid by the news of her death. They sued the Sunset Eden, but eventually settled out of court for an undisclosed amount, along with an agreement to never speak about the incident. No resident was ever placed again in Ward 306 after Mrs. Wainwright. The Sunset Eden would go bankrupt a few years later and would be demolished to make way for new office blocks. Even buildings will one day face their end. Any former resident of the Sunset Eden can tell you that it is a torment to grow old, to lose all that you value: your health, your memories, your independence, your freedom, your dignity, your friends, your family. But they would also tell you that's not the worst thing about growing old. It is knowing that there exists forces dark and sinister, lurking beyond, waiting patiently, and that death may not mark the end of your torment, but merely the beginning. Tempus, edax, edam, god, es, edus, god, sum. Time devours all. I was what you are. You'll be what I am.